In this video, I'm going to give you the 7 decisions a 1 million a month CEO should never be making inside of his business. Let me start by something really uncomfortable here. If your company currently is doing 1 million a month and you are still personally making hundreds of operational decisions every single week inside of your company, you may have built a very successful business, but you haven't built the enterprise. Because at 1 million a month, the question completely changes. You're no longer asking the starting question, can I make the business work? Now you shift to and ask, can the business work without my constant intervention? And that is completely a different problem. At the beginning, your involvement is the advantage for your business. You know the customers, you probably also know really good the product, you know the sales process, you know the team, you also know what the fulfillment looks like, you know what good looks like, you know what bad looks like. You can make decisions faster than everybody else. But eventually, the thing is that helped you to build the company becomes the thing that's actually preventing you from scaling your company to the next level. And that person is you that's holding the company back. And this is where a lot of founders misunderstand the transition from an entrepreneur to a CEO. They think becoming a CEO means making bigger decisions. I think it's completely the opposite. Becoming a great CEO means becoming extremely selective about which decisions deserve your attention at all and which not. So in this video, I'm going to give you 7 decisions that a 1 million per month CEO should never be actually personally making. I'm not saying these decisions don't matter. They matter enormously. I'm saying you should design the organization so they don't require you. Because your job isn't to become the smartest person inside of the company or the smartest person inside of the room. Your job is to build a company that can make good decisions without you always being present. So let's start with the first, which is, I think, the biggest decision problem when it comes to actual execution, when it comes to operations, when it comes to growing the business, when it comes to focusing on the right things in the business. The first one is, how should we handle this customer? And I think a lot of times we have been given most of our time to our customers, which is taking the time away from growing our companies. And so if you currently have routine customer problems requiring your time, that's a big issue. They shouldn't require the CEO. A problem with a customer shouldn't always require a CEO. Or let's say sometimes the closer, let's say they are on the call and you see it's like the closer is most of the time, let's say 60% of the time, 50% of the time, even let's say 40, 30% of the time, are asking for CEO to be on a call before the client goes ahead. That's a big red flag, because now that's taking away your time from actually doing what you are required to do, which is to grow your actual company. So if routine customer problems should not 100% require the CEO. Now, however, there are sometimes really unique situations when, yes, you will have to step in, but not on kind of routine checks, where every single client almost needs to get your approval, or some clients want to speak to you and you always have to jump on a call. If every difficult customer eventually reaches you, you have trained your organization, your business to actually escalate. So you don't have to ask, what should we do about this customer? The question that you should do is, why did this situation require executive intervention? Was it that the onboarding was weak? Was it that there was no clear expectations? Maybe the account manager was missing the authority with that specific client. Was there no escalation process? You see, a great CEO fixes the system first. So that means currently this is happening inside of your business and customers are requiring a lot of your time. Sometimes a closer or SDR, for example, reach out and they said, hey, they want to speak to you. We have currently an escalation with the client and that client wants to speak to you. And then we have this and this client and this customer, before they go ahead, they also want to speak to you, and you'll have this all happening. That means you don't have currently a system in place that protects your time and that allows those decisions to happen by themselves from your actual team. Okay. The next one, I have written this down as well. Who should we hire? At 1 million a month, the CEO shouldn't personally approve every hire. The question isn't, do I like this person? Do I feel that this person is valuable? It's more importantly, the question of what capability does this person add to our organization? Where can this person can take our organization? You should have systems in place, hiring systems, so hiring scorecards, hiring standards, decision rights, leadership development, all in place to take the hiring off your hands. And so the biggest question I would like to ask you is, let's say if you're not 90 days inside of your business, can your team or can your recruitment hire another 20 players inside of your business? And if the answer is no, then that means if in 90 days you go away and they cannot hire those 20 people for you, we have a huge issue that you don't have currently the right systems inside of your business for hiring, right? So that's a very big thing that you need to really think about it. So if you disappear for 90 days and your team can hire 20 people without you, that means we have an architectural problem. We have a systems problem for hiring, training, and processes. And that's what you should be focusing. So the next one is, what should everyone work on today? I feel this is kind of the question that should not definitely show up when you are doing 1 million a month, okay? That's question maybe at the beginning when you're maybe probably doing 30, 40, 50, probably sometimes in most cases, all the way to 100K a month. You maybe wake up and say, hey, well, what should everyone be working on today? If you are a leader of a 1 million a month company, the priority completely changes. You need to have a system in place that tells you what everyone needs to be doing. That system dictates your pace, it dictates the team's pace. So if priorities change every time the CEO opens Slack, the company isn't operating from actual strategy. They are operating from CEO's emotions, they are operating from CEO's nerve system. So the CEO should determine, where are we going? What matters the most right now at this time, where the company is now? What are our constraints that are limiting the business to get to the next level where we want? And what are we deliberately ignoring that we should not be ignoring? Then leadership suddenly starts to translate into actual execution. And so you have to have a system in place where these questions have to be answered. These questions have to be answered. If you, for example, you wake up and Slack or your calendar dictates where the business is going or what the business is doing, then you have a huge organizational problem inside of your actual business. Next one. Which problem should we actually fix? This is where systems thinking becomes really critical, because eventually if you wake up and you say, for this one, decision for which problem should I fix, and you say, well, let me wake up and see what problems I have currently in the business, and then I will act accordingly. I will look at the problems in the business and I will start solving them. You need to understand that your business needs to have the right architecture currently. It needs to have the right architecture of diagnostics that understands exactly what constraints currently are in the business and what are actually holding the business back. You don't need to fix every single problem. That's not your job. You're not there to be the best problem fixer. You are there to work with leverage. You remove one constraint that's limiting the business so that business can move on to the next level. Once the business moves on to the next level, that's when we move in and remove on the next constraint, okay? So you need to identify the constraint limiting the entire enterprise. If demand is strong but fulfillment is overloaded, don't fix the marketing. If the sales are strong but cash conversion is terrible, don't fix the lead generation. So sometimes even, let's say you have the fulfillment is the problem, and you say, and the clients are leaving, and you're saying, well, for the clients that are leaving, we should replace them with new clients coming in. Well, that's a big problem. That's a big no-no. So you need to look at the actual constraints, and that's where the diagnostic questions come in. It's like, what are we currently looking at that's actually limiting the business growth? What exactly is limiting the business growth? How well do I understand the constraint that we currently have? Because sometimes you may be dealing with actual symptoms. So it's really important that you have a diagnostic framework inside of your business that can diagnose the systems and understand exactly which system is currently producing a very poor outcome. And that outcome then automatically needs to be fixed by either redesigning the system or removing the constraint. So stop asking what problem should you fix and ask yourself what constraint is currently limiting the entire enterprise. And that becomes the CEO question. Next one, which technology should we buy? And I feel this is the golden object syndrome. And I think a lot of CEOs have this one. It's like we have AI, we have these new CRMs, we have new automations, dashboards, new platforms, new tools, new funnels. There is so much things that we can invest into. There is so much things, but eventually the CEO sees something impressive and says, you know what, I like to get this. But I also eventually want to ask you a question, right? So instead of you asking, wow, we should get this, you need to ask yourself, what capability are we trying to actually create currently by getting this automation, by getting this tool, by getting this CRM, by getting this AI? What leverage are we trying to create in the business, and what capability are we trying to actually create from this? What does this help us to do? Because if you have broken systems, it's just going to amplify the broken systems you already have. If you have weak marketing, it's going to amplify weak marketing. If you have weak communication inside of your business, it's going to amplify weak communication. If your departments cannot communicate together, it's just going to amplify what's already being broken by 10x. And so you're just going to amplify the problems you have. So you really have to look at the systems where you're going to be placing the new platform or the new technology in, or the new AI or the new CRM, and ask yourself questions. Will it be amplifying my broken system, or will it be actually amplifying the strengths of the business currently? And that's the big question you should be asking, because the two companies can use exactly the same software and produce completely different results, because one was invested where they have strengths in their systems, strengths in their architecture, where the other one had no strengths, let's say only weakness and weak systems, and they were amplifying those weak actual systems. Because eventually your technology should make the organization faster, more connected, and more intelligent, not simply by just getting a software or a new tool to give your people to actually play with. So the decision number 6, which expense should I approve? If you currently are a CEO of $1 million a month company, you shouldn't be really stressing about every single transaction. However, the CEO should control the capital allocation, but you shouldn't get stressed about every single transaction. If someone needs you to approve, let's say, $400 subscription, that's not a financial control. That means there's an executive bottleneck, because you need to build spending thresholds, budgets, forecasting, clear decision rights, how you make decisions, what gets approved, where the time should be focused on, what is a good subscription that we should be investing towards, what is a subscription maybe that we should double check, follow the criteria, follow the checklist, and make that decision based on there. But if it's like, say, a $23 subscription and somebody needs to go to you for approval, now you have a real bottleneck inside of the business, because you don't have the right systems of which decisions you really need to get involved into. Let's say somebody wants to spend $50K on something, now that's a completely different question. But if somebody wants to get $23 for a subscription and they need to go through your approval, there's a big bottleneck currently inside of your business. Even if it's a $500 subscription that they need to be spending on currently to improve your business, that's a really big bottleneck currently you're having. They should already be making that decision by themselves based on the criteria, based on the systems you already have inside of your business. Because if you don't have those systems, that means what happens when you're 100 million? So now every single small thing is suddenly going to you. So my main thing for you is this, is to build a business that is going to be operating when you are at 50, 100 million a year. Build that type of business. Build the business for the next 100 years. So have the systems in place already. You have to have them, okay? Because then your focus attention will usually go on things that are more important than just small decision making inside, okay? So the big question you should ask yourself is, when we are talking about capital, is where does the next dollar create the greatest strategical capability? That's the CEO level finance question that you should be asking yourself. Not the question of approving subscriptions. The next one is, what did we learn? Which I believe, the number 7, which is the final one, what did we learn? I believe this is one of the most strongest things that any business can ask themselves, is what are we currently learning? What have we learned from our past experience inside of the business? What we have learned from our failures? What we have learned when that employee didn't succeed? What we have learned when we messed up that one client? What we have learned? Because the companies that usually are growing the fastest and are very durable for very long periods of time are the companies that learn the fastest. So this might be the most important one. Let's say, for example, if a project fails, everyone moves on. Customer leaves, everyone keeps moving on. Let's say you hire somebody, they fail, and we keep moving on. 6 months later, if the same mistake happens again, then the question isn't why it happens again. The question is that we haven't learned of the same pattern occurring again and again and again. It's like, for example, employee leaves, and then in my mind, I think, okay, maybe the employee was not happy. Whatever. We need to get a new employee. Let's say employee fails, and I was like, hey, we need to replace one. But if this keeps happening, then maybe the question could be, maybe I don't have the right systems for those people. Maybe I hire somebody inside of the chaos without actually a role, without a system for them to succeed in. Because usually when somebody's hiring somebody, and I'm going to give you different levels. At the lowest level, somebody's hiring because they are really desperate to hire somebody. There's too much chaos, too much things to do. They cannot do everything themselves. They just hire somebody and then they just say, hey, here's the shovel, start digging. Without really telling them where to dig, how deep to dig, what is good digging looks like, what is bad digging looks like. And so they just give them the shovel and said, start digging. And then 3 months later, they say, well, that was the wrong place where you're actually digging. I don't think you understand. And they fired him. And then they say, well, he wasn't an A player. But what you really need to understand in this case scenario is that it wasn't that the person wasn't an A player. It was that there was no expectations, there was no system, there was no process, there was no training, there was no what does a good job look like, what does a bad job look like. There was none of that. And so you place somebody inside of your chaos. So the same goes with learning. It's like you need to learn about your business consistently. If you fail, you need to not only ask, well, it's maybe an event, but if that event keeps occurring all the time, the question becomes, what system allowed that specific outcome to occur? Why is this outcome all the time keep showing up? What we have missed? What we are not seeing? And then that's the question you should be asking yourself, because you eventually need to come to the point of understanding if the same problem keeps happening again and again and again, it's not the problem's fault. It's not just a random event. It's not that somebody's punishing you. It's that your system, your architecture is the main bottleneck that allows that specific problem to occur. And that's the main problem. So every major experience should become organizational knowledge. So the question is, what happened? Why it happened? Why did we assume? What do we assume? What was wrong? What changes now? What should become a new standard? Elite organizations don't simply accumulate experience, they convert experience into actual intelligence. And also a big one that I want to say, which I kind of learned, was when you are hiring people, you need to really learn from those people as well. And so that doesn't mean that you have, let's say, a great closer. He comes inside of your business, he's closing all the deals, and one day he leaves, and suddenly he leaves with all the knowledge, all the objection handling, all the frameworks and everything. You should learn from him, and you should already consume the intelligence that he has and place it inside of your organization. You should have his knowledge inside of your organization. So when somebody else comes, they can already be placed in that same system and almost produce the same results. Usually what ends up happening, an employee leaves and they leave with all the knowledge, all the objection handling, all the skills that they had, everything. And the business didn't capture none of that, none of the information, none of the learning process that that person had, none of the intelligence that they had, nothing. And you become the loser. So this is why the learning doesn't only come from your mistakes, your past, your experience, and your opportunities you are currently trying to capture. It also comes from the people inside of your organization. One of your best, greatest things you can do inside of your company is take the best people that currently operate inside of your company, take them, learn from them, document the process of how they're doing, organize the process, improve the process, create the system around it, and now you have a perfect system to place somebody in because they will be performing and they will be producing results. And that's the main difference between a company that consistently keeps learning and growing and the company that just keeps seeing things as randomly actually happening. If you really enjoyed this video, and this comes to the end of our 7 decisions that you shouldn't be making, so just to go all over them again. So the first one was customers, okay? Who should and how should we handle customers? Second one, who should we hire? Third one, what should everyone work on today? Fourth, which problem should I fix? Fifth, which technology should we buy? Sixth, which expense should I approve? And seventh, what did we learn? If you enjoyed this video, click the like button, subscribe to my channel. Also, click the notification bell, because I release videos like this, content like this every single week, where I talk about the infrastructure, the CEO mindset. I talk about the entire infrastructure architecture of your business that you need in order for you to scale. As an operator, as a CEO, as a leader, as a manager, what exactly you need inside of your company to create the enterprise actual value. If you have any questions about this video you enjoyed, or you want to maybe ask me something specific, down in the comment section, that's where you can do it, and I will do my best to answer.